Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. I've been at my younger brother Leo's engagement dinner for exactly 3 hours, and already it's starting to feel like a scene out of some bad sitcom. The room's buzzing with small talk, the kind of polite chatter that never gets past surface level. It smells like garlic bread and fresh cut flowers, typical Fresno. But all I can focus on is Leo, holding court at the center of it all, cracking jokes like he's the king of the evening. Then he says it. You know my sister. She's the eternal meter maid. I freeze, caught in the full blast of his grin as he gestures toward me, like he's unveiling some big secret. The table laughs, Candace included. She's a sweet woman, nice enough, though I've only met her a handful of times. I don't even bother to correct him. Again, Candace, looking a little confused, asks, "What do you actually do?" Before I can answer, Leo jumps in with a flourish. "Oh, she drives around giving out parking tickets," he says, voice dripping with sarcasm. Tries to act like it's tactical ops or something. I want to scream. I really do, but I don't. The whole room is laughing, and I just let it go. Because the thing is, nobody knows. Nobody ever asks. They just see me and see parking tickets and think that's the sum of it. The truth, it's a lot more complicated and a hell of a lot more dangerous than they could ever imagine. I'm humiliated, but I keep my smile steady, nodding like it's no big deal. Then, without even thinking, I make a deal. "You know what, Leo? I'll make you a bet. I'll give you until the wedding. If by then I can't prove that I've done something worthwhile, I'll pack up and come back to Fresno. I'll take a job at your dealership. How's that sound?" The room quiets, and Leo's laugh dies down a little. He pauses, probably thinking I'm joking, then grins again. "Sure," he says, chuckling. "Deal. But if you don't, you'll be stuck selling cars with me for the rest of your life." I don't smile, I just nod. Because I'm not joking. I've been waiting for 18 years to set this right. 18 years. I can't remember a time when Leo didn't see me as the underachiever. It was almost like he decided I would always be the joke of the family, the one who never quite measured up to his version of success. He was the golden child, right? Got into real estate young, bought his first house before he was even 25. He made good money, stayed local, and had the entire town thinking he was some kind of big shot. His life was predictable, easy, and everyone loved him for it. Then there was me. I left for Sacramento right after high school, told them I was doing city enforcement. They thought it meant traffic tickets, which, fine. Maybe I let them think that. But what I did for a living was a far cry from writing parking citations. I was a covert field investigator for an elite counter-fraud unit in the Department of Public Integrity. But no one knew that. Not because I was embarrassed to tell them, but because I couldn't, legally. And yet, I kept getting the same questions, the same teasing. Every family gathering, every birthday, every holiday. "Isn't she the one who hands out tickets?" Leo would ask, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Isn't she like the queen of expired meters?" It was always the same punchline. "Badge Barbie," he'd call me, a nickname I've been hearing for years, like it's some sort of joke. And I'd smile and nod, let it slide, even though it stung every damn time. Mom always changed the subject when anyone asked about me. It was like she couldn't bear to admit she didn't know what I was really doing either. She'd smile awkwardly, stir her coffee, and talk about Leo's latest business deal instead. Dad wasn't much better. Whenever he'd introduce me to people, his voice would drop like he was telling them some great secret. "This is our daughter," he'd say, as if I wasn't even worth saying my name. "She works with a clipboard." A clipboard. That's how he saw me. That's how they all saw me. I never corrected them. It wasn't like I wanted them to be proud of me for what I did, though part of me always wished they would. The truth was, I couldn't tell them. It wasn't just a matter of pride. I was legally bound to silence. There were rules. Leo leaned into the joke harder over the years. He even mailed me a toy parking ticket book once, wrapped in cheap birthday paper. He thought it was hilarious. I laughed along, though it felt like a kick in the gut every time. But it wasn't about the joke. It was about the fact that no one ever bothered to ask. No one ever cared to know the truth. Leo just kept running with his story, feeding the narrative, making sure everyone in the family thought I was some kind of failure. I kept my mouth shut. I told myself it didn't matter. But it did. Every time he called me Badge Barbie or told people I handed out parking tickets, it chipped away at something inside me, something I couldn't fix. He didn't know, of course. He never cared to know. He just liked being the center of attention. And I became a punchline. I started to get used to it, but the pain was always there, just under the surface. It didn't help that no matter how much I achieved on my own, no one noticed. No one cared to look deeper. Maybe that's why, when the idea of the bet came up at the engagement dinner, I didn't back down. Because for once, I didn't want to be the joke. I wanted Leo to see me for who I really was, even if it meant embarrassing myself in front of the entire family. I didn't need their approval anymore, but I needed Leo to know the truth. And this time, I wasn't going to back off. I wasn't kidding. I could feel my heart beating in my throat, but I wasn't backing down. This was my shot to put an end to the joke that had followed me for years. The room went silent after I made the bet. It was like I'd dropped a bomb in the middle of the table, and everyone was waiting for the explosion. Leo looked at me, eyes wide, then he laughed. Because of course, he thought it was a joke. He always thought I was just playing along. Well, all right then, Leo said, rubbing his chin like he was some sort of mastermind. If you can't prove you've done something worthwhile by the wedding, you'll move home and work at the dealership. But if you can prove it, I'll give a speech at the reception, publicly admit I was wrong. He looked at the table for approval, his grin wide. A few family members chuckled. Candace just raised an eyebrow, like she was a little curious, but not enough to understand what was really happening. The whole room heard him. They all thought it was funny, like they were watching some dumb sibling rivalry unfold. But I wasn't joking. I wasn't here for their laughter. I was here to make him understand that I was more than the joke he made me out to be. I kept my eyes steady on him. Yeah, you're on. But I'm not backing down. Leo gave me that same cocky smile. You're gonna have to really pull something out of your ass to prove that. He nudged Candace, who smiled politely but didn't say anything. He turned back to the table. Better hope your meter's still running, sis. You've got until the wedding. The way they all looked at me, half amused, half confused, made my stomach churn. But I didn't move. I wasn't leaving without my dignity, and I had 18 years of frustration built up in me. The next day, I called my boss. When I told him about the bet, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. My boss wasn't thrilled. You know I can't just let you go blabbing about the operation, he said. You've been through enough under the radar for us to keep everything tight. I know, I replied, clenching my teeth. I'm not asking to blow any cases. I just need a piece of something that proves I've done more than hand out tickets. I could hear him sigh on the other end. I'll authorize you to share some details about the Fresno corruption bust. It's non-classified, but it'll show them you weren't just writing parking tickets. That's it. And you can't go any further than that. I almost breathed a sigh of relief. It wasn't the full picture, but it was enough. It wasn't just about winning the bet. I needed Leo to know. He needed to understand that I wasn't some joke in a uniform, that I had done something that mattered. After I hung up, I sat in my car for a while, thinking about the next month, about what it would feel like to show them, to let them see who I really was. I wasn't going to lose this time. 2 weeks passed since the engagement party, and I'd done everything I could to make sure I had what I needed to win the bet. I'd contacted people, dug through files, and made a few calls that might raise some eyebrows. But the hardest part, getting through Leo's jokes without losing my cool. I was sitting in my apartment one afternoon, going over my notes when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something about the area code told me it was local. I picked up, figuring it was probably work-related. Hello. Hey, it's Candace. I froze. Candace, Leo's fiancée. She'd been quiet at the engagement dinner, mostly staying out of the spotlight while Leo did his thing. I didn't think we were close enough for a random call. Hey, Candace, I said, trying to sound casual. What's up? I've been thinking about the party, she started, her voice softer than I expected. I felt weird. About how Leo was talking about you. He doesn't mean harm, but I don't know. I just wondered what you actually do. My gut tightened, but I kept my tone even. I told you. City enforcement, code investigations, some classified work. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the wheels turning in her head. You walk like someone who's carried a gun. Her words hit me like a punch. I didn't know whether to be offended or impressed. How would you know that? I asked, half laughing but still cautious. My dad was a detective for 30 years, she said, almost matter-of-factly. I've spent enough time around cops to know when someone's been trained. Plus, you don't have the stance of someone who just writes tickets. I didn't say anything for a moment. I was still processing. Candace wasn't just some naive fiance caught up in Leo's jokes. She had a sharp eye, and she wasn't buying what Leo had been selling. So, are you saying you know what I do? I asked, trying to steer the conversation back to solid ground. I know you're not just handing out parking tickets, she said, and I know Leo's an ass for making you out to be a joke. I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. I didn't know what to make of this. Is the bet real? She asked, cutting through the tension. Are you really going to prove him wrong? I swallowed hard. Yeah, it's real. And I'm not losing. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when she spoke again, there was an edge to her voice. Good. Because Leo needs to learn that he's not always right. A small, genuine smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. It felt like a weight lifted, knowing that someone, at least one person, saw through Leo's act. Someone who understood that I wasn't just playing along. I appreciate you saying that, I told her. I'm not doing this for Leo, though. I'm doing it for me. She chuckled, a sound that was surprisingly warm, considering how tense everything had been. I get it. Just don't let him keep pushing you around. I won't, I said, finally feeling like I could breathe again. Well, good luck, Candace said, her voice lighter now. I hope you win. Thanks, I replied, a bit surprised by her sudden kindness. I will. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. Like I wasn't in this alone. Candace wasn't just Leo's girlfriend anymore. She was an ally, and I hadn't even seen it coming. For the first time in ages, I actually smiled. The next month was a hell of a ride. Leo didn't let up for a second. It was like he'd decided to turn the bet into his new hobby, the one thing that gave him a reason to poke fun at me every time we saw each other. He made sure the whole damn family was in on it. Hey, how's ticket duty going? He asked at brunch one Sunday, the words flying out of his mouth like he had some kind of script. Still fighting the criminal underworld of unregistered Hondas. The table burst into laughter, and I felt my face flush, even though I knew what was coming. The jokes weren't funny anymore. They just made my stomach twist. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of reacting. So I just played along, like I always did. Yep, I said, shoveling a forkful of eggs into my mouth. Just another day in the life of a parking enforcer. He grinned, all smug. Maybe you'll catch a big fish this time. Like a speeding Prius, or a Honda with a broken taillight. I couldn't stop myself from rolling my eyes. Nobody spoke up to stop him. Not mom, not dad, not the family friends who were there. It was like they all bought into his version of the story because it was easier. It wasn't about what I did or what I could do. It was about keeping things simple. So simple that they could all laugh about it without having to think too hard. I used to be able to just brush it off, but it was different now. The stakes were higher. Every joke Leo made, every little jab at my expense, reminded me of why I was doing this. It wasn't just for me anymore. It was for the years of silence I'd had to endure, for the years I'd been reduced to a punchline, for the years I'd spent in the shadows while Leo strutted around like the golden child. After brunch, I went back to Sacramento. I couldn't afford to waste any more time. The details of what I was about to show weren't something I could just drop casually. It was going to take careful planning. I had to keep it simple, but also make sure Leo and everyone else understood the gravity of the work I'd been doing for almost 2 decades. I got in touch with a retired Superior Court judge I'd worked with a couple of years ago. His name was Judge Harrison, and he had seen the operation I led firsthand. He'd been the one to sign off on a lot of the subpoenas we'd used in the corruption bust that had gone public in Fresno. I was nervous as hell when I called him. I wasn't sure he'd even remember me. But when he picked up, his voice was warm, like he hadn't forgotten our time working together. Detective, he said, as if it was a question, but with recognition in his voice. Judge Harrison, I replied, swallowing my nerves. I need your help. I've got a bet to win, and I need to prove something. He laughed, a deep, gravelly sound. A bet. Now you've got my attention. I explained the situation quickly, told him about Leo's constant jokes and how I needed to prove that I wasn't just some traffic cop. I need you to back me up. Talk about the corruption case we worked on, the one with the city council and the public contracts, I said. I need to show that I wasn't just writing tickets, that I was leading an operation that took down a whole network of people. There was a long silence on the other end, and I could practically hear him thinking it over. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked. "You're playing with fire. You've got a lot on the line." "I know," I said, my voice tight, "but I've been playing by the rules for 18 years. I can't keep doing that." Finally, he sighed. "All right, I'll help you. I'll speak at the wedding and I'll make sure they know what you really did. But you've got to be careful. You know the risks." "I understand," I said, the weight of his words sinking in. It was risky, but at that point, I didn't care. I'd come this far. I wasn't going to back down now. We ended the call, and I sat there for a minute, trying to steady my breathing. I had what I needed. It was going to be enough. The plan was simple. I would introduce the judge at the wedding, and he would give a brief overview of the operation I led, the corruption bust, the convictions. He would make it clear that I wasn't just handing out parking tickets, that I had been working undercover, infiltrating a system so corrupt, it would have made their heads spin. As much as Leo wanted to joke, I knew this would hit him where it hurt. No one laughed when a judge told them the truth. The bet wasn't just about proving myself anymore, it was about proving that I'd done something real, and that Leo, for all his swagger, had never bothered to see it. The wedding was a spectacle, everything out of some Pinterest board fantasy. It was held at a vineyard on the outskirts of Fresno, long rows of grapevines stretching out in every direction, the sun setting low and casting everything in a warm, golden glow. The ceremony was all candles and flowers, and the reception was an outdoor setup with fairy lights twinkling above like tiny stars. People from every corner of Fresno seemed to be there, all dressed up and buzzing with excitement. And Candace's extended family, mostly from Phoenix, had flown in too, adding their own mix of Southern charm and warm, overzealous smiles. Leo was in full showman mode. I could see him working the crowd from across the room, his smile wide, his hands moving like he was conducting an orchestra. It was the same Leo, always the center of attention, always getting the last laugh, always in control. "Better soak it up," he said to me when I walked past him on my way to the bar. "Might be your last party before traffic school." I forced a smile, my teeth clenched tight. This was his thing, always cutting me down when I least expected it, always making sure everyone knew his version of me. And he wasn't going to stop, not now. The cocktail hour was in full swing. People laughing and chatting, a mix of chatter and clinking glasses, the smell of grilled meats and wine in the air. I was nursing a glass of sparkling water, trying to keep my nerves in check when Leo pulled me into a group of people near the edge of the crowd. "My sister thinks she's James Bond," he said, raising his voice enough to make sure everyone could hear him. "But really, she's just handing out violations in a vest. Classic METER MAID." The group erupted in laughter, a few people snorting with the force of their giggles. The kind of laughter that makes you feel small, like you're a punchline and not a person. My face burned, but I didn't flinch. I just kept my gaze on him, the smile still glued to my face like it had been all these years. "Leo," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You ready?" He gave me a confused look. "For what?" I nodded toward the edge of the lawn, where Candace's dad had just arrived with the retired judge. He was wearing a sharp suit, his posture straight and professional. Candace's dad smiled politely, but the judge was all business. Leo turned to look, squinting for a second before he caught sight of the man I'd called in. His face froze for a split second before he recovered, a nervous chuckle escaping from his lips. Okay, what's this?" Some kind of surprise. I didn't answer him. Instead, I walked to the mic that had been set up for speeches. The music died down, the sound of glasses clinking falling away, and everyone's attention snapped to me. It was just a moment, a brief pause in the evening where everything hung in the balance. I wasn't making a speech. I was making an introduction. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the mic, the weight of it solid in my hand. My palms were sweating, but I held my ground. "Good evening, everyone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The room fell silent, all eyes on me. Leo's smug expression had vanished, replaced with something I couldn't quite read. I'd like to take a moment to introduce someone who's been a huge part of my life and someone who's about to set the record straight. I nodded to the judge standing off to the side. The room still had no idea what was coming, no clue what I was about to do. "This is Judge Harrison," I said, a quiet pride in my voice that even surprised me. "And he's here to give you all a bit of insight into the work I've been doing for the past 18 years. There was a stunned silence as the judge stepped up to the mic, his voice calm and deliberate. The crowd shifted, a few people murmuring under their breath. I glanced at Leo, who looked like he had just swallowed a lemon. His expression was all disbelief, and I could see the wheels in his head spinning, trying to make sense of what was happening. Judge Harrison's voice filled the air, steady and authoritative. "I've known my name for quite some time," he began, looking straight at Leo, then the room. "I worked closely with her on a high-level corruption investigation in Fresno that uncovered a network of city officials involved in bribery and public contract fraud. She led that operation, working undercover for years without anyone knowing her true role." I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't look away from Leo. I couldn't. I wouldn't. "The work she did," the judge continued, "was dangerous, thorough, and immensely impactful. She played a critical role in putting corrupt individuals behind bars, and her contributions went far beyond what most people would ever understand. This wasn't some parking ticket officer. This was someone who risked everything to make a real difference." There was a beat of silence before the room erupted into shocked whispers. Leo stood frozen, his face pale, his lips pressed tight. No joke, no witty comeback, just stunned silence. "And," Judge Harrison said, his tone softening just slightly, "I'll say this. My name never once asked for recognition. She worked quietly, putting the work ahead of her own pride. But tonight, I think it's time the truth was told." The judge stepped back from the mic, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. My heart was pounding in my chest, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like I'd finally done something right. The room was still in shock, but the truth was out there, and Leo. He didn't have a word to say. The room was still. Not a single person made a sound. It was like someone hit pause on the evening, freezing every face in shock, all of them staring at me, at the judge. And Leo. His face went blank, pale even, like he'd just been hit with a sledgehammer. Judge Harrison stepped up to the mic, his voice steady, but there was a weight behind every word. "I worked closely with my name on a high-level corruption investigation right here in Fresno," he said, his eyes scanning the crowd like he was reading a list of names in his head. "This case involved bribery at the city council level and fraudulent public contracts. The operation uncovered a network of people involved in large-scale corruption, and the person leading that investigation was my name. She's the lead investigator on record for this case." There was a collective gasp from the crowd. Some people shifted like they were suddenly unsure of where to stand. I felt a tightening in my chest, but I held steady, my gaze never leaving Leo. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. "The work she did wasn't easy," the judge continued. "She had to operate undercover for years, gathering intel, building cases that were sealed tight. It was dangerous work, and it led to 3 major convictions that have made this city better." The judge paused for a moment, letting the words settle in. I could feel the weight of them sinking in deep, but I didn't allow myself to look away. Not from Leo, and not from the crowd. The judge stepped back, and just when I thought I might choke on the silence, Candace's father, who had been standing quietly nearby, spoke up. "I've got something to add," he said, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. "Your sister isn't a parking cop." He pointed directly at Leo, who now looked like he'd swallowed a fistful of gravel. "She's a damn state investigator. I looked her up. She's not playing around. Never was." The words hit Leo like a freight train. His face tightened, a muscle in his jaw jumping as he processed the reality of what was being said. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but nothing came out. The silence stretched on. People were still staring, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. And then I finally spoke. "I never lied," I said, my voice even but sharp. "You just never listened." The words hung in the air, cutting through the tension like a knife. Leo blinked, his mouth snapping shut. His face shifted. Anger, embarrassment, confusion, all at once. For the first time in my life, I saw my brother truly at a loss for words. I turned to Candace, who was standing by her dad, her arms crossed. She looked at me, a soft smile curling up at the corners of her lips, like she'd known this whole time what was really going on. Like she had been in on the secret. "See?" I said to Leo, nodding toward Candace. She knew. Candace's smile widened just a little. She didn't say anything, but the look in her eyes told me everything. She had never bought into the story Leo had been selling. She had always known there was more to me than what he mocked. Leo didn't know how to respond. He stood there, frozen for a moment, his eyes flicking from me to Candace and back again. He cleared his throat a few times like he was trying to clear the fog from his head, but nothing came. His hands were stiff at his sides, and for the first time, I saw the weight of his arrogance crack. The showman had lost his act. He finally took a step back, like he was unsure of how to make this right, but he couldn't find the words. Everyone was waiting for him to say something, but the silence stretched out longer than he was comfortable with. It felt like time slowed as everyone in the room processed what had just been laid bare. I was no longer the joke. Not to Candace, not to her dad, not to the judge, and not to anyone who cared to see the truth. And Leo. Well, Leo had nothing left to say. I didn't want to make this more painful than it had to be, but I had waited too long to be invisible, to let him tear me down for sport. I had been quiet for years, waiting for the chance to say something that mattered. This was that moment. This was my time. And for once, it felt damn good to stand tall in my own truth. The party was still in full swing when I slipped behind the event tent to get some air. My head was spinning, the weight of everything that had just unfolded pressing down on me. I needed a moment of silence, a few minutes to collect myself before the flood of questions started. That's when I saw him. Leo was sitting on a cooler, staring down at his shoes like he was trying to figure out how to put them back on after they'd just been kicked off. He didn't even hear me approach. The usual confident smirk was gone, replaced by something heavier. Guilt, maybe, or just the crushing realization of how far he'd misjudged me. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, watching him, waiting for him to notice me. When he finally looked up, his eyes were empty. He looked smaller somehow, not the bigger-than-life guy I'd grown up with. "I didn't know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I crossed my arms, standing a few feet away, but I couldn't look away from him. "You never asked." His shoulders slumped like the weight of his own words had hit him. I thought if you were doing something important, you'd say so." I exhaled, my chest tight with a mixture of relief and frustration. I couldn't. "Leo, you think I'd stand there and tell everyone what I really did? There were rules. I didn't lie to you. I just couldn't tell you the truth." He didn't answer at first, just stared at me, like he was trying to make sense of what I was saying. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, like the words were stuck. And then, without warning, his voice cracked. "I've spent 20 years making you feel small," he said, his words barely coming out, so I could feel big. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. My brother, the one I'd always looked up to, the one who had never seen me as anything more than a joke. He finally got it. I swallowed hard. "It hurt every time you mocked me." I smiled, but it chipped away at something inside. He looked up at me, his eyes wet now, like he couldn't quite contain the shame. I wasn't sure if it was regret or just a sudden rush of understanding, but it hit me harder than I expected. He had never seen me as anything more than a joke. He'd spent years building himself up by tearing me down. I didn't know how to fix that. I didn't even know if I wanted to, but I wasn't going to let him off the hook. Not now. Not after everything. "That ends now," I said, my voice firm, my gaze steady. "But you've got work to do." He nodded slowly, the weight of those words settling between us. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to be the bigger person. I didn't need to protect him from the truth. He needed to hear it, and I had nothing left to hide. I took a few steps closer to him, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then, without thinking, I reached out. He stood up, and before either of us could say anything else, I pulled him into a hug. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real. His arms wrapped around me, and I felt him tighten his grip like he was afraid to let go. I don't know how long we stood there, just holding on. But when we finally pulled apart, there was something different in his eyes. A quiet understanding. A flicker of the brother I used to know, the one who saw me as more than just a punchline. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, like the words had been stuck in his throat for years. "I never should have. You didn't deserve that." I nodded, my throat tight. I couldn't say it back just yet, but maybe I didn't need to. The apology was in the air between us now, unsaid but understood. "You're right," I said, finally letting go of the tension in my chest. "But we're good now." He nodded, his eyes still a little glassy, but his smile, finally, was real. "Yeah, we're good." It wasn't perfect, but maybe that was the point. We hadn't been perfect in years, but standing there, in that moment, I could finally see a way forward. And for the first time in forever, it didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. It felt like I could breathe again. Dinner had wrapped up, the plates cleared, and the noise of glasses clinking and people laughing was beginning to fade as the music wound down. I was just about to slip away to get some air when I saw Leo stand up from his seat at the head of the table. He motioned for the mic, and the room fell into a hush. He cleared his throat like he was trying to shake off a lump in it. "I have something to admit," he said, his voice louder than he probably intended, catching everyone's attention. I froze, half expecting a punchline or some smart remark. But he didn't deliver it the way I thought he would. He looked directly at me, and for the first time all evening, I saw a shift in his eyes. Maybe he'd spent years pretending not to see me, but right now, he wasn't looking through me. He was looking at me. "I've mocked my sister for years," he continued, the words coming slower now, more deliberate. "All because I was too proud to believe she'd done something better than me. I thought if I could make her out to be some joke, I'd feel bigger." I could feel the weight of those words hit the room. My chest tightened. This wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined him brushing it off, cracking another joke. But this was different. "Turns out," Leo said, his voice breaking through the tension, "she didn't just make a career. She made a damn difference." The room was silent for a beat before a wave of applause swept through it. People clapped, some whistled, others stood. And I just sat there, blinking like I was still trying to process the words. My throat closed up, and I had to blink fast to keep from crying. I didn't want to cry, but damn, it felt like a weight had been lifted off me. It was all finally out there, all the years of silence, of pretending, of biting my tongue and taking his jokes. Now it was gone. He'd said it, and everyone knew the truth. A few people came up to me right after, their faces full of curiosity and a little awe. "I had no idea," one of Candace's aunts said, shaking her head. "You've done some real work, huh?" I nodded, keeping it simple. "I guess I have." Even my parents came up, both of them a little stunned, but with a newfound respect in their eyes. Dad gave me a pat on the back, something a little more sincere than usual. Mom, too, just held my arm and looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time in years. That night, after everyone had filtered out and I was starting to unwind, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Leo. "Proud of you." Always should have been. I stared at the words, the screen glowing in the dim light of my hotel room. I hadn't expected this, not from him, not like this. I wasn't sure what to say, but I typed something simple. "Love you too, real estate boy." A minute passed before his reply came through. "I'll take it. Better than METER MAID." I smiled, a real smile, the kind that felt earned. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like maybe we were on the same page, like maybe Leo was finally seeing me for who I really was. That night, I went to bed with a feeling of peace I hadn't known in years. It wasn't about the bet anymore. It wasn't about proving anything to him or anyone else. It was about the truth, about being seen, and that was enough.